Hey, welcome back to the Métropole Grid. My name is Andre. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we have a new ban list that just dropped 1 minute ago. This is the 2512 ban list, not in effect until the 1st of December. And just off the top of the video, there's 2 cards banned, no unbans. 2 neutral cards. Firstly, on the runner side, we have Matryoshka. The AI breaker limits 6 per deck. The dolls stack, it just was recently seeing a fair bit of play the last couple months, and it is now banned out. And on the corp side, 1 card, the neutral 3-1 agenda from 2013, still somehow in the standard format. False lead has finally been banned. There's no more clicks to lose. You don't have to ask for an action. That's all this ban list is. There's no unbans. Mind you, this is always a weird ban list after Worlds because the competitive season kind of goes on hiatus for a bit. Things get a bit interesting with off meta month. But once Vantage Point comes out in just maybe a couple months, the meta will be shooken up once again. Now, for the rest of this video, we're going to take a couple minutes to talk about these bans and why we got here and what we think the future is going to look like. If you want to take a second to leave a like on the video, that really is appreciated. It helps the channel. But otherwise, let's dive in. And so there's only 2 bans. Mind you, this is an article that Null Signal Games shares ahead of time to content creators. Thanks so much, NSG, so we can make content like this. But it is linked in the description. And in terms of articles, this is actually one of the shorter ban list articles. It's just about a page. And the changes are really straightforward. It starts here talking about Matryoshka. Despite being legal since 2022, Matryoshka only started seeing significant play this year. And this is Matryoshka. If you're not familiar, it is an AI breaker. You can have up to 6 in your deck. So really efficient bans per man. 3 is the install cost, but that's all you're paying because all the other Matryoshkas, you spend a click just to host them on here. You don't have to pay any costs. And then you break ice really cheaply, like actually surprisingly cheaply in 2025. It's 1 for strength and you come in at 2 strength and 1 per subroutine. However, you have to flip the dolls over. So the amount of dolls you have on the table limits the amount of ice you can break. On average, I think the hypergeometric says you need about 13 card draws in a 45 card deck to get your 2 dolls on the table. And then from there, more dolls, more ice. Now, these numbers for breakers are surprisingly good. A lot of old heads call these corroder numbers. This was the best fractor from the original core set and was the best fractor in standard for many years, as much as that was, nearly a decade ago. And Corroder's numbers were good. There were a lot of icebreakers that saw play back then. It was a different game that were worse than Corroder. And turns out Corroder numbers are actually really good right now. And while, Matryoshka came out in the Parhelion cycle, I believe at the end of 2022, it saw no play back then. And it's kind of a bit of a whiplash looking back at decks from then, because in 2022, late 2022, we had breakers like Paperclip. Like breaking ice was so much cheaper in a lot of ways. We had cards like Endurance in the format. I was looking at a criminal list, right? This is Worlds 2022, a couple months before this thing came out. Like we have Cleaver, of course, which is now banned out, took a couple years, but we had Bugalter. Like the breakers back then numerically were a lot better than they were right now. And the article brings us up. If we look at some of the modern breakers, this is Kurapira. It's Criminal's best fractor, and its numbers, as much as it has text, just not as good as Matryoshka. It is more expensive to break basically every barrier in the game. Some of them are the same cost. And this is seeing a lot of play. Why are we playing Rising Tide when we have something better than Rising Tide? Like the Sunk Consul just came out in the last set in Elevation. And while this can be a bit better when you're playing a run event, it's not that much better than just playing Matryoshka. And I think that's what a lot of runners will figure out is if you play 6 Matryoshka, you're not sweating it when it comes to getting the right breaker at the right time. And the math just isn't that bad at all. There's also a lot of these like knock-on benefits that might not be obvious immediately. If you're playing something like ESSA, and mind you, ESSA almost won Worlds, playing 5 Matryoshka, shout out to Davs and EA Sports team. But you install your first Matryoshka, and then the other ones, you can just get out of your hand by not spending any credits, just by spending a click. And so if you're going to take core damage, it's easy to get the cards that are valuable out of your hand without having to spend 4 credits to install your decoder before you can lose it to damage. Similarly, if you're playing against damage like a Yuko, you don't have to sweat it. Again, your cards, you can get them out of the hand if they're important, install your 2 dolls, install 1, more accurately host the other one, and then you can face check. You can take that bladderwork damage, you can take the FUT damage, and that actually turned out to be a pretty big deal. And dolls got really popular. This is the World Showdown, which was an online event, a massive online event a couple of weeks before Worlds. And out of the top 16, I think about 6 or so of the decks were playing dolls. This was the event where I remember it being the biggest metaphors. And I think dolls actually mostly showed up here in criminal decks. Moosely Hot and Sable were all playing doll decks. And going into Worlds, there was a big question how much dolls we're going to see and were dolls going to win Worlds? Because it was proving in the lead up to Worlds to be super, super effective. At Worlds, there's still dolls there. I think it was still about 5 decks in the top 16 that were playing dolls. It kind of shifted more towards Anarch decks. I think we only saw 1 criminal deck playing dolls itself. But the Breaker Suite turned out to be really quite good. And even when dolls were targeted and expected in the meta, well, we saw a lot of decks tune themselves into dolls, and LEO also just kind of got a bit better naturally into dolls because the run back after they broke 3 pieces of ice and got the run ended with the ID ability, all the dolls were flipped. That can be a problem. But we saw people slotting in these tech slots. Hammer became somewhat popular, just as a really hard dolls hate card. VSA, I think, is actually one of the big reasons, especially in earlier tournaments where we saw Epiphany Analytica pop off, where there were some decks that had no good answer to this thing. And of course, Samaxamoon is showing up everywhere. And I think actually there's a big chance now in the next couple months, without dolls, you're going to see much less of Samaxamoon. I think this change is going to be both interesting and also maybe not interesting, because removing dolls is largely just going to force people back to playing regular breakers. You did see dolls just about everywhere. I think Shaper was the one that was the least common to see dolls being played. It doesn't really work well with Muse and SMC and some of the tricks that Shaper wants to do. But again, when it came to criminals, dolls was possible, but also just good stuff criminal is possible, was still possible, is still going to be possible. You just need to install the right breakers at the right time. Anarchs are probably going to be moving back to conventional breaker suites if you want to enjoy your Reg Hoshiko. Installing your Buzzsaw for 4 is a taller ask for sure, but maybe you're just going to be gachaponing it down more consistently. I do also think though, and the deck that won Worlds was not playing dolls, it was playing another AI breaker. And despite being in a field that was meant to be so punishing towards AI breakers naturally, Audrey still got there this year in 2025. Maybe Anarchs are going to find out that installing 3 different types of breakers is too tricky, and we're all just going to shift to Audrey and Botulus and, do that sort of virus package. I could see that. And then the meta will self-correct to that. The Samox will come back. The Hammers will come back. It's going to be interesting, but overall, I think this is a change that I even could have seen going into Worlds, just banning out dolls in general and forcing people to go into their faction directions, as opposed to just having that stack of AI breakers in which it seems like you make less decisions. I think overall I'm happy with this ban. I think it's kind of a shame because Matryoshka is one of the cutest designs of any card in Netrunner. I think the theme is just like really charming. The 6 different flavor texts are also really charming, but I could see a world where this could come back. I think this just needs to come back in a world where other breakers and breaker options are a bit more compelling. I don't think people are excited to play Rising Tide, and yeah, dolls kind of just look good compared to the other options you have. Now, the other ban, the ban that I'm really excited about is False Lead. This 3-1 agenda, it's a security subtype, that doesn't matter. Once this is in your score area as a corporation, you can forfeit this and the runner loses 2 clicks if they can lose 2 clicks. This is the sort of question, do you want to take an action where you always have to ask between your 2nd and 3rd click? Oh, that's a bit tiresome. I'm kind of used to it. But this card just has been around forever and has dodged ban lists for so long, it's nearly unbelievable. This card is still in standard, or technically it is in standard for the next couple of weeks. This came out in 2013. This is an article from about 13 years ago announcing a study in static. This was the 4th ever data pack in Netrunner, coming alongside cards like Bullfrog and Force of Nature. It's a totally wild world. But the original printing, you can still play that in standard. There's still a handful of old FFG cards, and for some reason, False Lead is one of them. Now, the big interaction, and the article calls this out, why False Lead is so strong is Oppa Research largely. Oppa Research will give the runner either 2 or 4 tags if they played the game of Netrunner. If they trashed your cards or stole your agendas, Oppa Research will be online. Now, if you have 1 false lead in your score area, heaven forbid 2 false leads, and the runner ends up taking 2 or 4 tags, when it's back to their turn, you just take their turn away or half their turn away, and they are going to be floating tags. And then back to you, 4 tags in, double end the line, mindscaping, whatever you need to do. You build these combos that are inherently impossible for runners to interact with unless they're playing heavy tech. And I like that the article called this out. The best counterplay to a scored false lead is in deck building rather than gameplay. So the question is, did your deck run enough no free lunges? Did you find them? Is your deck running enough stone chip chart rooms? These are the sort of cards that are important. I do think some people really want that sort of meta understanding to be important when they're going to a tournament, calling that call. But if you ask me, it's really frustrating. And I've seen so many games that kind of devolve. Once the false leads get scored, the game becomes messed up in a way that it just kind of punishes interaction and it becomes really passive. Runners have to try and win in a single turn or just find their tech. And while I like agendas to be powerful, I feel like this is the angle that might not be entirely healthy. Just to show you the decks that this shows up in, it's just about everywhere. While Nebula caught some bans earlier this year, Nebula Fast Advance score out false leads from hand for sometimes only 1 credit. And then at any point, Oppo Research into end of the line. That's the game. Almost Winning World, 2nd and 5th. This is the Ayuko deck. Now losing Sting just a couple months ago, replaced it with false lead. And you know the drill. Oppo Research, end of the line. That's just how it goes. And then Thule. We haven't seen HB decks do this in a while, but there are so many decks that if you can play False Lead and score a False Lead, hey, if there's end of the line, you have Opal Research. It's a package that's not too hard to import into any deck that wants to put assets on the table that cares about tags and damage, which turns out modernly to be most of the asset decks. And in the future, the article says that's a problem they have to deal with, and the only way they can deal with it is get rid of False Lead. And honestly, like 12 years later or whatever it's been, feels pretty wild, but I'm kind of celebrating it. False Lead has been this really ugly thorn, and some metas are defined by it, and I think we're currently in a meta that is defined by False Lead. Now, 3-1 agendas, it's worth mentioning, they're not very popular. These are all the 3-1s currently in the standard card pool. 2 of these, I believe, are banned, and it's just a hard thing to make exciting. 3-1s are just the bad ratio of advancements to the amount of points and deck slots in your deck. And I'm also concerned because some of the 3-1s that get printed are just the biggest misery engines. Things like Stegodon, things like, well, False Lead is now gone, aggressive trend setting. These are the sort of things that just add misery. They add like 10 minutes to the game. And it's so hard, it seems, to nail the sort of design of what a 3-1 should be in Netrunner. A powerful effect, but an interesting effect that doesn't just make the game this sort of like poisonous swamp to trudge through. And while I am celebrating the loss of False Lead, there's definitely going to be people that are not happy that it's gone, because I think False Lead represents something really important in Netrunner that might not exist, and that is agendas that really matter. This is Elevation. These are the agendas from Elevation. We got 8 agendas, and maybe this is a bad example because a bunch of these agendas are just functionally blank 3-2s, but a lot of these cards don't matter. Barring arguably Proprio Negation, none of these cards really matter to the win condition of decks in the standard format. They're just points. And that is a thing that I think is worth discussing about False Lead. It was a direct win condition. It was a card you had to score out. It impacted the matchup. When one was scored, the game shifted. That stuff is kind of cool, and I would love to see it revisited. But yeah, somewhere in the middle, I think, is where we're going to end up, because a lot of these cards, they just don't matter if they're in a score area. They're just points. And I'm hoping Vantage Point has something to say about that. And that's it. I do think the article ends with 2 things. Firstly, they said, we seriously considered making no changes in this update. This is the end of the competitive season after Worlds. So while we have off meta month and there's a lot of like grassroots tournament structure, No Signal Games' organized play circuit is in a quiet spot. So this is usually a time to do something a bit more adventurous. We've seen some weird metas in the sort of like November to December where you kind of just explore. And I don't think this ban list is particularly explorative. I think they call it out. We opted for a riskier, more experimental ban list for this period of downtime. I'm not sure this is a riskier experimental downtime. I actually was kind of expecting this sort of ban list going into Worlds, and it would have had a huge impact at Worlds, at least the False Lead side. The dolls did well, but not as well. But I find this to be like a relatively, I think, acceptable ban list. I'm assuming a lot of people are going to celebrate this. Less AI breakers. A lot of times people like that. Less False Lead. A lot of people like that. But yeah, I think no changes was definitely an option. I don't know. False Lead is the one card I just have never liked, so I'm personally celebrating it. Again, there's no unbans. I don't know if there's anything I would say could be unbanned. If we want something experimental, like give back Bologna, see what NBN does over the next couple months. I think there's things you could do, but regardless, we're going to get a lot more cards in just a couple months, and I think that's going to be the big excitement we might need here. Well, that's it. 25-12 ban list legal as of December 1st, sneaking in that 12 there. Hopefully you're getting involved in some cool local organized play. And then, of course, Vantage Point is around the corner. Huge shout out to Null Signal Games for sending this stuff out early so that content creators, we can talk about it and put up a video. Check out the whole article. It'll be up on the Null Signal Games website. It's linked below. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy content like this, you want to take a second to leave a like in the video. That's incredibly appreciated. And we'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Ciao. Hey, thanks so much for watching. This has been a really busy weekend. I'm recording this thing really quickly, relatively. I was hoping that I have time to sneak in a video, and it looks like we probably nailed it, so good job. But at the end of today, this was the ultimate showdown. So we were streaming for about 8 hours. It was an invitational tournament. You can find the link below. I would recommend watching it. It was a really exciting tournament, some really good Netrunner games. But yeah, False Lead and Matryoshka were actually really important at that tournament. It felt like even more important than Worlds. So this is definitely going to be mixing that up. And having a solved meta, I guess we have some more puzzles to unsolve or to resolve over the next couple months. Of course, I want to give a huge shout out to all these names here and more. The Métropole Grid, we are supported on Patreon, so we can do stuff like this. We can do filming, motion graphics, all the editing, all the live streaming. We're streaming every Thursday night if you want to drop by. But this stuff would not happen with all these names here and more. Huge shout out also to our daily cast patrons. If you want to support Netrunner content like this, you can find a link in the description. Any amount of contribution is incredibly appreciated. Even if you just want to leave a like on the video and a comment, like that sort of stuff really helps here on YouTube. But finally, False Lead, it's gone. I'm going to celebrate that. Dolls, they were cute, actually really nice design. So maybe they'll come back in the future. Again, I do want to say, as I said in the video, having an agenda that matters is really cool. And I'm hoping that we find something in Vantage Point that gets us feeling that excited about scoring a 3-1. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Ciao.